Syria is in the spotlight this week, with Damascus holding high-level political talks with the European Union here in Brussels. In an exclusive sit-down with Euronews, Syria's foreign minister said the country will not allow a, quote, rushed, unorganised return of Syrian citizens from Europe. Minister Hassan Al-Shaibani called on the European Union to support the reconstruction of his country after the brutal civil war. Our European editor, Maria Tadeo, sat down with the minister and is here on set this morning to bring us up to speed. First, tell us about these talks in Brussels.
Well, Maeve, the talks obviously come at a pivotal moment for Syria. This is a country that is clearly in a political transition, is coming off of two very difficult decades, completely turbulent on a political front, a civil war that lasted almost 14 years, very brutal. Obviously, that also led to a massive wave of Syrians who left the country, many of which, of course, ended up in Europe. The authorities now in Syria, led by President Al-Shaibani, they argue that this is a moment to rebuild, reconstruct, and make this country more stable. They have, of course, reached out to the United States. They are in close ties with Turkey, the Gulf countries, but another key partner in this, and they say this openly, this came up multiple times in my interview with the foreign minister, is the European Union. At this stage, as it stands, the European Union has lifted sanctions on Syria to give the economy a breather. It also is now moving into the full implementation of a cooperation agreement between the two countries. Obviously, the goal, again, is for the EU to play what they argue would be a stabilizer role in the country. And for Syria, it's about rebuilding the economy, so you have conditions for people to return and get this country back on track to the extent that it's possible in the shortest amount of time. Now, the EU, however, will say to fully restore ties with Syria, the authorities, the government there needs to ensure that the minorities, both religious and ethnic, are respected and they have equal rights. This principle of inclusivity is incredibly important for Brussels. So the message that was stressed to the Syrians, as I'm told by a number of diplomats, is that yes, there is a window of opportunity. The EU wants to see a partnership that could see this country finally becoming stable in the Middle East. They also see it as a way to counter what they describe are malign actors, including Russia. Of course, Assad fled to Moscow immediately after his fall, but they also insist this principle of inclusivity is incredibly important for the European Union to move ahead.
And the issue, of course, of migration played a big role as well in these.
Well, this is absolutely a huge topic as it stands, because not just when you look at it through the prism of the EU, but really European governments, we are seeing that the political landscape in Europe is changing. Obviously, the discourse around migration, asylum rules, and refugee status, which are three different things to some extent, is certainly much tougher. It has really hardened. Germany, which is a country that took in the highest number of Syrians, has now completely changed its narrative from we will manage dealing with almost 1 million people who arrived in Germany to now the chancellor is saying we need to accelerate the returns because the war is over and they need to rebuild this country. That was a question that I put to Syria's foreign minister, Al-Shaibani, and he told me, yes, they agree there is a need to rebuild the country, but it will not be chaotic. Syria has not committed to a specific number of people returning to the country. Let's take a look.
There was no agreement on this matter, and there was no agreement on the number of Syrians to return to Syria. There has been talks about Syrian refugees in Europe and in Germany in particular, and there are talks and an agreement on a mechanism that will not hinder the process of reconstruction in Syria today. This is another thing I do not agree with, especially since today European countries no longer accept granting asylum to those who leave Syria, especially since today they believe that the situation in Syria evolved with a secure and stable law. However, we have warned against this matter, that imposing an involuntary and undignified return of Syrians will lead to chaos in Syria, and that the situation in Syria needs to create an appropriate environment.